do you mean by that, dear Hill? A proprietary grant of land.
It wasn't directly
Pardon?
the Crown didn't control it directly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's interesting you say that, Hill. The Crown did not control it directly. But with a proprietary grant of land, the proprietors basically had the discretion to do what they wanted on it. And, I mean, what did the Calvert/Baltimore family want to do with it, Hill? Well, they wanted to make a profit off of this land, but they also wanted to provide a haven for persecuted Catholics. Now, given the topography, geography, and climate of the area, how were they going to make a profit if this land was in the Chesapeake Bay north of Virginia? They clearly were going to make a profit, how? With tobacco. And so in some ways, Maryland and Virginia become similar in that they are plantation-based colonies. That people go there to grow tobacco, that people aspire to acquire land that they can grow tobacco, and if they are going to grow tobacco, they need labor to do so. Right? They need labor to do so, which becomes very important. Now, we said this as well. The Catholic element in Maryland eventually leads to conflict. I mean, yes, Lord Calvert, who dies, never gets to Maryland. Lord Baltimore establishes, the colony, his son. But he establishes a haven for persecuted Catholics, but it's only a minority of the people. The majority of the people that go to Maryland are non-Catholics. They are Protestants. And so there's tension between kind of a ruling aristocracy of Catholics and a rank-and-file level of Protestants. And that tension eventually leads to the Religious Toleration Act of 1649, which the AP loves and is on the test. And remember, the Religious Toleration Act of 1649 just very simply assured anyone who believed in the Holy Trinity the freedom to practice their religion as they saw fit. Now, in talking about Jamestown, we did mention two things about Jamestown, not as much about Maryland. One of the things we said is that Jamestown is the first permanent settlement, that tobacco defines the colony, that a labor force is eventually going to become important. But we did also say that in 1619, in Jamestown, the first representative legislature meets, the Virginia House of Burgess. And that's significant. That's significant. The first representative legislature in British North America meets, and that is the Virginia House of Burgess. Also, we said that it's the same year where we have evidence of Africans being in Jamestown. And we think that those Africans may have been either slaves or some level of indentured servants, which we'll talk about later, indentured servants and slavery and a labor force for Virginia. But that's mostly discussed in Chapter 4 in your textbook. Now, in addition to Virginia and Maryland, also in Chapter 2 in your textbook, there is a discussion of the Carolinas, which are also in the South. Now, in our discussion of the Carolinas, when we talked about it, we talked about all of the pre-Restoration colonies, and then we talked about the post-Restoration colonies, regardless of where they were located. So we talked about the pre-Restoration colonies that were located in Virginia, Maryland, and New England. And then we established the Restoration, and then we talked about the post-Restoration colonies, which were, the Carolinas, New York, and Pennsylvania. Now, just for fun, Coulter, tell us what the Restoration was, just for fun. And I know it will be fun. The king was to the throne. The king was restored to the throne. That's where that restoration thing comes from. The king was restored to the throne. So the king was gone. Actually, the king was executed in 1649. King Charles I was executed, and his son Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660. Yes?
Is the restoration on the test?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
the restoration's on the test.
Like dates or?
There are questions that the textbook authors put together where they have you put things in order.
Okay.
right? Which is the order of things, right? And they're usually pretty flagrant. So, I mean, if you knew the dates of them, it would be good. But even if you didn't, you kind of know, well, this happened first, this happened second, this happened third. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
So what was I talking about? Oh, you want to know if the restoration was on the test. So I wanted to establish restoration. The reason I wanted to establish the restoration is that the Carolinas were the first colonies established after the restoration. Carolina was an area south of Virginia, but north of Florida. That area was granted to 8 proprietors by King Charles II to reward them for their support of his effort to get back on the throne. Those proprietors are not really going to move to settlement until about 1670. And when they do, most of their focus is on the southern part of Carolina. One of the things that we said about settling in the southern part of Carolina is they struggled to find some source of economic income for the people that went there. And a knowledge of the things that they may have gone through, like trading Native American slaves, deer hides, cattle, and eventually sort of coming up with rice as a lucrative cash crop that could be grown in the southern part of Carolina is going to be important. Now, rice is significant for a number of reasons, right? It becomes a lucrative cash crop. It generates kind of a stratification between large rice plantation owners and common folk, but it also defines the southern part of Carolina in another way. What is it? Because of the nature of rice, what's necessary that's going to affect? Yes, go ahead, Brad, right? Andrew, yes, go ahead. Yes. Rice plantations are going to require labor, and certain types of labor. And there are African slaves who are experienced in rice cultivation who are imported to the southern part of Carolina in large numbers. So slavery is going to take hold in the southern part of Carolina, maybe earlier than it really fully takes hold in other places in colonial America, even though there are slaves in Virginia and Maryland prior to the establishment of southern Carolina. In terms of the slaves and slavery in southern Carolina, the southern Carolinians had an advantage in sort of establishing slavery in that area. What was it? What was their connection? Where did they learn about slavery, Bill? Yes. Remember we said that there was a connection between those who settled in the southern part of Carolina and Barbados? And, I mean, these are British Barbadians, if that's a word, right? Who had experience in growing sugar and came to the southern part of Carolina looking for something else. Some of them became involved in rice, but they were familiar with slavery. And they brought with them, slave codes and rules and regulations and trading and other things that were important to establishing slavery there. Why did North Carolina and South Carolina, Phillips, eventually split into 2 separate colonies? What would be your assessment of that, dear Phillips? Pardon me? They eventually have 2 separate legislatures, but why? At first they were established as one colony, Carolina, but eventually they divide. What's the source of that, Alex?
Because they were so different, you weren't capable of growing rice in the northern part of Carolina.
Oh, so you are saying, dear Alex, in the northern part of Carolina was not conducive to rice, they did not have a good harbor. Who went there? Who went to the northern part of Carolina then, Anna? I mean, who went there? I mean, the Barbadians went to the southern part, correct? Who went to the northern part? Yes?
People that were rejected from above.
Riff-raff went to the northern part, right? Not to offend any of our friends at home from Northern Carolina, but that's what others call them. Riff-raff, people who